All right, one of our favorites. Absolutely a pleasure anytime we get to talk with Kelley Ford. You know him best as KFord on the Twitter machine, and he just put out his updated version 2 SEC projection, so I had to have him on. Kelley, how's it going, brother?
Going well, Mike. Thanks for having me. As always, I always appreciate it. Always have a great time chatting with you.
For people like my co-host cousin Shane, this is a lot of data, a lot of numbers, and credit to you for simplifying it so that people like we can understand it. Because some of these, analytics and stuff, we're like, I don't even really know what that word really means. But the way you present it, the way you put it forward, can you just, you don't have to go into a ton of detail, but just kind of what goes into everything that makes the KFord SEC projections?
Yeah, for sure. And that's actually my goal, Mike, is I've come to realize it doesn't really matter how good your model is, how sophisticated your math is. If you can't communicate it to large numbers of people, it really doesn't matter. So I've tried really hard to present it in such a way that's easy to understand and make sense. And so I'm glad to hear that you and cousin Shane enjoy it, and hopefully the listeners do too. But yeah, just really quickly about just the KFord ratings themselves, because of course this applies to the SEC, and I know we're talking SEC today, but it also applies broadly to all 134 teams in FBS. We're in the preseason now, as everybody knows. I want it to be the season just as much as anybody, but for now, we don't have any in-season data. So how can we come up with preseason projections and power ratings for teams? We're looking at three main things: your returning production, your recent KFord ratings, and your recent recruiting. That sounds familiar to a lot of people because that's exactly what goes into SP Plus with Bill Connolly's numbers. Of course, how I generate my own is a little bit different than how Bill does his. Obviously, he's the GOAT. He's been doing it for a long time and really paved the way for a lot of other people like myself to come into this space. But those are the three main inputs that we have into the power ratings. And Mike, I've had to change the weighting of those three components because in today's day of college football, how you build a roster, how you have success, it looks a lot different than it did 1, 2, 5, 10 years ago. So spent some time this summer kind of tweaking those inputs, trying to backtest and figure out what's the right mix, what's the right weighting, and we've landed in a good place, and that's how I generate the power ratings for all 134 teams. And it's no surprise that just about every single one of the teams in the SEC is finding themselves near the top of that list.
Right. And then one other question I had for you before we dive into it, team by team breakdown here. How do you go about ranking offense, defense, and special teams? Because you have that listed out for every single team, and I'm talking specifically for 2024. So can you briefly explain how you do that?
Yeah, so it's very similar to the overall power rating. So the team, you have an overall power rating. Within that overall power rating, you have an offensive unit rating, which then a corresponding ranking, of course. You have a defensive unit rating, and you have a special teams unit rating. Those three ratings then get combined together in a unique combination of weights, again, to generate your overall team power rating. So the things that go into the overall team power rating, it broken down at a base level, that's how I generate the offense, defense, special teams. Special teams, of course, very, very minimal weight, especially in the preseason. By the end of the year, it is possible, if you are elite on special teams or if you are absolutely horrid on special teams, it is possible that can actually make a little bit of a difference in your overall team power rating. But by and large, for most teams, and really across the board, it's your offense and your defense combined together. And again, it's not 50-50, and it's not even necessarily the same for every single team. So that's the level of detail that we've gotten into with the power ratings, but that's how I generate those, a very similar fashion to how the overall team power ratings are generated.
Right, yeah, just ask Billy Napier about how important special teams are. He'll tell you all about it, but that's neither here nor there. All right, let's get into it team by team, Kelley, and I'm going to throw up the graphics that you presented to help the audience kind of break all this down while we're talking about these teams. But Alabama, 9.3 projected wins, according to KFord. Only one game with less than a 50% chance to win, according to your model, and that is Georgia at home. So can you help us kind of understand 9.3 projected wins, yet only one game with less than a 50% chance to win? How do we get to there?
Absolutely. And this is going to apply to every team that we talk about, Mike. So every single game has a win expectancy for each team. And so for Alabama, as you mentioned, they're above 50% win expectancy in every game, with the exception of that week 5 game at home against Georgia. That's at 38%. So some people say, okay, so you're saying they're going 11-1. That's not what we're saying, because when we look at the win expectancy for every game, so for example, Tennessee, and I know that's a big one for you, Mike, at Tennessee, 59% chance that Alabama wins that game by my numbers. I'm not assuming one full win for Alabama in their season win projections. I'm assuming 0.59 wins. Just like for Tennessee on the flip side, I know we'll get to them. It's not 0 wins from that game that I'm expecting. It's 0.41 wins that we're assigning to Tennessee. So it's when you add together all the individual game win expectancies for Alabama and every other team, that's how you get that average total wins of 9.3 for the Crimson Tide. So, outside of the Georgia game, at Tennessee, at LSU, at Oklahoma, under a 60% win expectancy in each of those games. So it is feasible that Alabama could lose each of those games and finish 8-4. If they did, I have a feeling lots of people in Tuscaloosa would lose their minds, and rightfully so after the bar's been set so high there. I'm not suggesting they're going to lose all 4 of those games. The numbers don't suggest that either, but it is more likely than not that Alabama will lose one or more of those games in which they have a greater than 50% win expectancy.
Right. So, I mean, again, we're not fortune tellers. If we were, we'd go to Vegas. We'd be millionaires, right, Kelley? But basically, I think what your projections kind of point to are the fact that what you're saying is in several of these critical games, at Tennessee, at LSU, it's more than likely going to come down to the last possession. It's going to come over to a turnover here or there. That's more or less what I'm getting at here.
No, 100%. And it's like that for a lot of teams and a lot of games this year, Mike. And that's normal. We see that in college football every single year. When you're winning in close games, when your record in 1-score games is really, really good, you're going to have a great year. If your record in 1-score games in college football is poor, you're probably going to underachieve. That's the difference between meeting and exceeding expectations and falling short. Oftentimes, for a lot of teams, is what was your record in close games? Over the years, Alabama under Nick Saban has been very good in those types of games. And Kalen DeBoer is a winner. So he's not Nick Saban. Anyone who says, he is Nick Saban, I would say I would really have questions for. But he has proven, DeBoer that is, that he wins at every single level and at every stop he's been at. So if people are expecting Alabama just to fall off a cliff just because Nick Saban's not there, I would question that as well. It's probably going to be somewhere in between, and I'm really excited to see where it lands. But Kalen DeBoer has proven he is a winner.
And this is not unique to Alabama, but how difficult is it with the projections, with a new coaching staff, new systems? We'll have it at A&M, Mississippi State, and not to mention there's always coordinator turnover as well. So how difficult is it to peg a team like an Alabama going into year one of a completely new staff?
It's gotten much more challenging in the transfer portal era, if we talk about roster composition, not just coaching staffs, to determine with certainty and high levels of confidence projections for teams that experience a lot of turnover in the transfer portal. The same thing goes for coaches. Any team that has a new coach, or to your point, coordinators too, like turnover within the coaching staff, it increases the uncertainty that we have with a team projection. So 9.3 for Alabama, that's kind of the middle of the road. There is a 17% chance that there's a 7% chance that they win fewer than 8 games. We don't think that's going to happen, but there's a 17% chance that Alabama wins 11 or more games. So we have these kind of confidence intervals, these expected outcomes, and it's likely that Alabama is going to fall somewhere between 8 and 11 wins, with the most likely win outcome being 9 or 10.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to Arkansas. Projected wins 5 for the Arkansas Razorbacks. And I thought this was pretty interesting, Kelley. Less than 30% chance in their 7 projected losses. So, again, this doesn't mean for sure they're going 5-7 or anything like that, but it kind of struck me that in the projected losses, not really seeing many toss-ups here.
Yeah, so for Arkansas, like you said, they're favored right now at Arkansas Pine Bluff in week 1 against FCS opponent. Week 3, UAB. Week 9 at Mississippi State, a 55% win expectancy. And then week 13 at Louisiana Tech. Those are the only games right now that Arkansas has greater than a 50% win expectancy. But like you said, or like we talked about before, it's not just about more than 50%, less than 50%. There's a 33% chance by my numbers that Arkansas goes bowling this year. So they have a 33% chance to get to 6 wins, meaning they are going to win a couple of those games in which the numbers right now don't favor them in that game. But like you said, 5-7 overall and 2-6 in SEC play, 2.0. That's the average projected conference wins for Arkansas, which is among the lowest in the SEC.
Yeah, and I personally, I'd hate to see it. I love Sam Pittman. So I've been overhyping Arkansas. I'm fine to underhype them this year. Let them prove me wrong.
I love it.
All right, how about Auburn? This is a tough one for me to peg, Kelley. KFord, you got them 7.1 projected wins this season, 6 projected. So this is, again, this is interesting. This goes to your point. 6 projected losses, but 7.1 projected wins. So again, it goes. You're not saying that, guaranteeing 6 losses because it doesn't add up there. But I would assume that's due to the Kentucky game being technically, I guess you say a projected loss, but 49%. Really what that is a toss-up type game. Is that how we get to 7.1 projected wins?
Yeah, so 7.1 and 4.9 projected losses. So 7-5 is the average projection for Auburn, but there's a 39% chance that Auburn wins 8 or more regular season games. So this team does have some high upside. They're a top 25 power rated team for me. I think the defense is going to be stronger than the offense, but the offense should be the best it's been since maybe 2020, that weird COVID year, and then before that as well. But they have a tough stretch there from week 5 really to week 9. Home against Oklahoma, on the road at Georgia, then you get an off week at Missouri, at Kentucky. That's a really tough stretch. And then we're not even talking yet about the end of the season where you host A&M and then you have to go to Alabama in the Iron Bowl. I mean, those 6 games right there, how many of those does Auburn have to win to achieve their goals for this year? I'm not sure, but that's where their schedule is going to be made or broken. Their record is. What's your record in those 6 games? That's going to determine how good Auburn had of a season. But like I said, 39% chance to win 8+. 3 to 4 wins in SEC play is what my numbers are projecting, 3.4 on average. So I view this as a top 25 power rated team. But in the SEC, it's below average because that's how good the SEC is. So if you picked up this Auburn team and put them in, say, the ACC or the Big 12, you'd be talking about them as a contender to win that conference championship. The SEC is certainly a different animal, and that's why Auburn finds themselves where they are, kind of in the middle of the pack of my SEC projected standings.
Right. And again, I know this is for a guy that, I'm having you on here because you're a model and things like that, and there's no way to model things like this, but I'm just wondering personally if you're a big believer in like year 2 jumps. If you're a really good coach and your program's headed in the right direction, it just seems historically in the SEC and some others that I could think of, but it's year 2 where a coach really showcases that they are elite. Do you buy into that narrative?
I do buy into that, Mike. I think it's a really good point. Year 2 for coaches, year 2 for players in a system, right? Like you see a big jump from year 1 to year 2, arguably a bigger jump than between any other set of 2-year periods. So yes, I do buy into that. I do think there's merit to that. Hugh Freeze in the past, when he's at Ole Miss, beating Alabama back-to-back years, he's had some other great wins as a head coach, but he has struggled at times to win the games that he's quote unquote supposed to win, if that makes sense. So if Auburn can take care of business and win the games that they are supposed to win, they'll be all good. And then get a couple of those upsets. If they stub their toe, it's going to negate some of those big upsets that you think someone like a Hugh Freeze can win.
Right. Now, Florida, man, oh man, I'm almost tired of talking about the schedule, but I have to highlight it here, Kelley, because the model's got 5.6 projected wins for the Florida Gators. But this is fascinating, and I saw you catching some heat for this, but I 100% agree with you. If Florida goes 8-4, you're not saying, guarantee lock for the playoff, but considering what they're facing, they should be in consideration. Billy Napier should probably be National Coach of the Year. He still may get fired at 8-4, but he should be Coach of the Year, and it's because schedule difficulty. You've got him as the number 1 schedule difficulty. Offense face number 1 most difficult, and defense face number 4 most difficult. Who hates Billy Napier down there at the SEC office that this is the schedule he got?
I don't know, man, but somebody's got it out for him because this isn't even the first year that this has happened. Yeah, the Florida schedule for the last couple of years has been really, really tough, and this year is no exception. It's arguably more difficult this year than it's ever been before, and you touched on it. Most difficult schedule in the country, the most difficult collection of opposing FBS offenses face. So if you looked at every single opposing FBS offense that Florida defense is going to have to play this year, not a single team in the country has a more difficult week in, week out task than the Florida defense. And on the other side, it's the fourth most difficult collection of opposing FBS defenses. So that Florida offense, they're going to be tested on a week in, week out basis. It's just ridiculous. I did catch some heat for the graphic I posted about, what number of regular season wins does a team need to be in that conversation for an at-large? And Florida was in a category of their own at 8 wins. If Florida is 8-4, I feel pretty confident. We don't know how the committee's gonna act in the 12-team era. I feel pretty confident that if Florida wins 8 games, they're not going to be in the playoff. Whether that's right or wrong, I think that's the reality. But what I'm suggesting is that an 8-4 Florida team against this schedule, at least as it's currently projecting, of course things can change throughout the year, but as it's currently projecting an 8-4 record against this Florida schedule, to me, they should be in the conversation when you're talking about those 7 at-large teams that you're going to have in the CFP this year. Will they actually be? Probably not, because the committee in the past has really punished you for your number in your loss column. And if you have a 4 in that loss column, I don't think the committee is going to give you consideration, even though the schedule you played and only had 4 losses against it is ridiculously tough.
Right. And just case in point, last thing on the schedule, I mean, they could realistically go 6-1 and lose the last 5, kind of like they did last year. Finish 6-6. Florida fans will be ready to throw him out the door, but the last 5 are basically, according to your model, I believe, all top 11 teams.
They are. The last 5 weeks for Florida here. Neutral site, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party against Georgia. That's number 1 power rated. On the road at number 4 power rated Texas. Home against number 11 power rated LSU. Home against number 9 power rated Ole Miss. And on the road in a rivalry game at number 10 power rated Florida State. Again, things are going to change throughout the year, but just looking at that on the surface, you're playing in a 5-week period, you're playing half of the teams in the top 11 from a power rating standpoint. I mean, Mike, it's ridiculous. I don't know what else to say. It's brutal. And I feel for Florida fans because I think you actually have a pretty good team this year, a top 25 power rated team. But because you're playing this schedule, I don't think you're going to love the record that you have at the end of the year. Doesn't mean you were a bad team. It just means that you played a really, really hard schedule. I do have a 53% chance for this team to go bowling for what that's worth.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of tough schedules, I don't think enough people have caught on to Georgia. 10.5 projected wins, according to KFord, but second most difficult schedule in the country. Again, they're Georgia, so no one's going to cry for them, particularly after their schedule last year. But only 3 games with less than 85% winning percentage, according to your model. At Bama, 62%. At Texas, 56% chance of win. And at Ole Miss, 76%. So, I mean, Georgia could still go undefeated, but it seems like even this murderer's row, I would think just about anybody in the country is going to lose one of these games.
Yeah, my model does suggest that Georgia, the most likely record here, 10.4 average wins, either 10 or 11 wins. 11 is slightly more likely than 10 for me right now, but it's highly probable that either 10 or 11 regular season wins is where Georgia will end up. And this is the number 1 power rated team in the country by my model, and by a significant margin. Georgia is not just, a half a point or a point ahead of Ohio State. They are a couple points ahead of Ohio State, who I have number 2 in the power rating. So this is, by a good margin, the best team in the country by my numbers, but they face a very difficult schedule. And Mike, you're right. Not enough people are talking about it because I think the narrative, at least it feels like to me, and of course your listeners would have a much better grasp on this. It feels to me like Georgia in the last few years and their dominant run under Kirby Smart, some people have kind of questioned the schedule and knocked them for the schedule that they played. And it's hard to do that too much because you're in the SEC, but the SEC East was the easier of the 2 divisions, the weaker of the 2 objectively from a power rating standpoint. And Georgia some of their big rivals that they're playing year in, year out, didn't always have the strongest teams in recent years. This year, though, there's no knocking Georgia for their schedule. Only Florida has a more difficult schedule in FBS, not just the SEC, in FBS than Georgia this year by my numbers in my version 2 power rating. So Georgia, yeah, they're going to earn the wins that they get this year. There's going to be no conversation about, the schedule and what does it mean and all that. So I think if Georgia even wins 9 games, I think their fans are going to be very upset, and people will say we underachieved greatly. but I think a 9-3 Georgia team deserves consideration for an at-large bid in the college football playoff. We will see if the committee agrees with that. The committee might be holding Georgia to a higher standard because of how good everybody thinks Georgia is and because of how good Georgia has been in recent years. So I hope the committee doesn't hold them to a higher standard unfairly. I hope they view them within the context of 2024 as they're supposed to. But it is possible that if Georgia goes 9-3, despite meriting consideration by my numbers, people will say, well, they disappointed. They underachieved so much that we're not going to put them in the playoff. I don't think Georgia's only going to, I don't think they're going to lose 3 games. But even if they do, I think they still have a viable argument to be made to make it as an at-large.
Yeah, they should fire Kirby if they go 9-3. Just do the rest of us a favor, huh?
That's awesome.
All right, how about again another crazy, ridiculous schedule here? Kentucky projected 6.3 wins according to your model, number 8 schedule difficulty, and I think this is a program, Kelley, that when we did away with divisions, this is one team that's going to suffer from it. But one thing I'll critique here: number 31 defense. That is surprising to me. I think Kentucky will have much closer to a top 20 defense this season. And only, Kelley, have you not been keeping up? Well, again, not you, your model. 33% chance to win at Florida. We're going to lose every damn Kentucky fan we got when they see that.
Kentucky fans, I'm very sorry. That's what the model's saying right now. But I mean, if you think about that, a 1-3 chance. So you play the game 3 times, you're expected to win 1. That's what that's saying. And I get it. Kentucky fans are going to say it should be much higher than that. I'll listen to that conversation. I do have Kentucky as, like you said, the number 31 power rated team. It's a top 35 offense and defense, so a very well-balanced team. I have them in the top 40 on special teams as well. Again, not that matters as much as offense and defense, but this is a very balanced team. And it is a program, I think, that, to your point, Mike, is going to suffer from the getting rid of divisions in the SEC. Every team in the SEC East is probably gonna feel that, right? Because it was the weaker of the two historically. Kentucky's no different. 72% chance to go bowling for this team. And I do think the expectation now in Lexington is to go, at minimum, go bowling. They probably say maybe even 7-8 wins is probably what they're thinking. I do have a 42% chance to win at least 7 games for Kentucky. A little bit harder to get to 8, only a 16% chance there. And it is because there are some really, really hard games on the schedule. You've got Georgia at home. You have to go to Ole Miss. You have to go to Tennessee. You have to go to Texas. Can you win one of those games? I think if you do, you'd be pretty happy with that. And then can you avoid stubbing your toe in the others, including at Florida, which, as you talked about right now, my numbers do project Kentucky as an underdog. But you talked about the schedule. And again, a lot of SEC teams are in this boat. It's the number 8 most difficult schedule in the country by my numbers. Of course, Louisville to end the year is going to be a tricky one. And Louisville might have revenge on their minds after what happened last year. That game in Lexington, though, I have it right now as about a 50-50 chance for Kentucky to win that one. So if they can get that one, if you can win Florida and then maybe spring an upset, I mean, you're going to be really, really happy with how your season's gone if you're a Kentucky fan, would be my guess. Yeah.
Well, one team that's been very difficult for me to peg, Kelley, is LSU. I've seen the analytics are all over the place with them. Your model's 8.7 projected wins. But this is what really jumped out to me. Projected number 3 offense and number 34 defense. Where are we getting that from this horrible LSU defense I've seen? Is this the collection of talent? Is it the offseason hires? How do we get to these numbers, particularly this defense being top 35 in the country?
So last year, LSU, by my numbers, had the number 1 offense and the number 71 defense. And a good case could be made that it's because of that defense that LSU did not find themselves playing even in the 4-team playoff. Certainly, if we had 12 last year, LSU would have had a strong case for consideration. But that defense really held them back. And as you said, number 34 is the projection on the defensive side for me coming into this year. It's a couple things. The collection of talent absolutely is there. They massively underachieved last year. There's really no doubt about that. And I think Brian Kelly's gonna find a way to get that fixed down there in Baton Rouge. But also, we just expect a little bit of regression to the mean or progression to the mean, if you will, in the positive direction here. Because this defense prior to last year, I mean, they were number 24 in 2022. 2020 and 2021 kind of weird years, but prior to that, I mean, this program has been known for defense. The 6-7 years before that, never finishing outside the top 30, only outside the top 20 once in that time period. So none of those players are here. Those coaches aren't here. But this program has an identity that the defense, more times than not, is going to be not just good, but really good to elite. I do expect them to take a big step back in the positive direction, a big step forward, in the positive direction here on the defensive side of the ball. And if they do, that's how you're going to get to that, 8, 9, 10 wins that my model's projecting right now, 8.7 with 9-3 being the most likely outcome. If that defense underachieves again, it's possible that you're looking at a 7-8 win regular season, which of course that won't be good enough for LSU fans. This schedule by SEC standards, a little bit easier actually than some of the others. It's only, Mike, and I say that with kind of quotes, only the number 16 most difficult schedule in the country. But again, by SEC standards, that's actually on the easier half of the conference.
Right. And to highlight that, the lowest win percentage projection for LSU is at A&M 43% and Bama at home 47%. So essentially saying Bama's a toss-up and Texas A&M you would win 4 out of 10. I mean, given just some of the schedules we've hit on, I think maybe not Missouri, but the rest of the conference would take that.
Missouri got a good hand. I know we're going to talk about that. Missouri got a good hand from the conference office. There's another team that did too, Mike, that we'll get to as well down the road. But yeah, I think most teams, this is the number 12 most difficult conference schedule within SEC play. So if you remove everybody's non-conference and view it only as SEC conference opponents faced, LSU is number 12 out of 16. So it's a top 5 easiest in conference schedule, notably missing Georgia, missing Texas, missing Tennessee, missing Missouri, and then the other games, of course, you miss Auburn, you miss Mississippi State, you miss Kentucky.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's do Ole Miss next. 8.8 projected wins for the Rebels, only projected losses at LSU, the 37% chance, and Georgia at home, 24% chance. So, I'm pretty fascinated, Kelley, because when the over-unders came out for Ole Miss, I think it was 9.5. I think it stayed generally around there, and I have Ole Miss as one of the best teams in the country. But and it's not just KFord, but it's a lot of analytics I'm seeing are a little hesitant on Ole Miss. Any idea why that would be?
Yeah, I think a lot of analytics or a lot of models, including mine, are a little hesitant on Ole Miss. And let's be clear about what a little hesitant is. I still have this as the number 9 power-rated team in the country, but there are some people out there. There are polls out there and people that have a big voice that say maybe this is a top 5 team. So when you're saying they're number 9 and others are suggesting maybe it's top 5, that's a little bit back and holding them back a little bit. But in the grand scheme of things, I think this could be the best team for Ole Miss that this program has seen since maybe 2015 when Hugh Freeze was there, beating Alabama, as I talked about earlier during the Auburn section. So Ole Miss is going to be really good this year. I think the offense is going to be, arguably the best they've been since maybe 2015 or even before. It's certainly going to be a top 10 offense coming into the year. And it's the defense, though, that has made a lot of strides. And this is a defense that I project to be top 15. That's the best, again, since 2015. We're talking about 2015 a lot here in comparison to this 2024 team, because I do think this is the best team that we've seen there since at least that time. There's only, like you said, 2 games at LSU and home against Georgia with under 50% win expectancy. But there are some other ones in there that are not quite toss-ups, but within the realm of reasonable upsets. At South Carolina, 68% win expectancy. Home against Oklahoma is a 58% win expectancy. At Florida is a 59% win expectancy. Who knows what happens in the Egg Bowl? I have a 92% win expectancy for Ole Miss, but we've seen crazy things happen in that game. So when you put all of that together, 9-3 is the most likely record. I've got, you said the over-under is at 9.5. I have a 30% chance to win 10 or more regular season games. So I would at this time lean to the under. But again, as you talked about, a lot of models out there, including my own, are a little hesitant to take that full step just because we haven't, not because, but in part because we haven't seen Ole Miss play at this high of a level since 2015. Again, that year we keep talking about. So I want to believe, I want to say they can be great, and I do think that the potential is there, but I think the model just needs to see a little bit, and I think even how Ole Miss plays against Furman, Middle Tennessee, Wake Forest, Georgia Southern, no one certainly is expecting them to be challenged in those games, let alone lose them. But if they really just lay down the hammer on those teams and just play outrageously well, we're going to adjust for the opponents, that the level of the quality of the opponent that's faced. But if they really just blow us away, us being the model in those first 4 weeks, expectations will be readjusted before we get into SEC play. And again, it's a little bit of an easing in. You get Kentucky at home, which Ole Miss fans are going to expect to win. And then on the road at South Carolina, is that going to be a night game? I'm not sure if we have times on that game yet, but South Carolina at night is a tricky spot. So even though Ole Miss is projecting to be much better than South Carolina, that could be a tricky game before then, of course, getting into the meat of the schedule with the road trip to LSU.
Yeah, and I apologize, Kelley. We probably should have just led with that at the front. But yeah, so you adjust these week to week. And it's so easy for, let's say you're an Ole Miss fan or a Florida fan or whatever, and you're like, we're not going to lose to XYZ team, and they may be right, and you may be right, but it's incredibly difficult. You're not just doing this for the SEC. You did this for the entire country, and again, it's easy when we're 3 games into the season to say this team's good, this team's no good, but I mean, this is with the portal, with the coaching transition. This is it's more difficult than ever to do all this, don't you think?
It certainly is. Yeah. There's no doubt that the amount of turnover that you have with rosters via the transfer portal now and with coaching staffs, and it's not just, ones that you expect to get fired or hired away. You've seen big time blue blood college football program coaches leaving on their own accord to go somewhere else. Like the amount of turnover in college football right now is just higher, at least in my opinion, than it's been in a very long time, if not ever. So it does increase the level of uncertainty that we have with the models, which of course I don't like, the fans don't like, you don't like, nobody likes uncertainty, but that's the reality of what we're dealing with right now in June, July, and August until we get into the season. As you said, and as I referenced, these projections, they get updated every single week. Every single Sunday during the season, I will put out the updated KFord power ratings, and it's from those power ratings that I'm able to generate all this other content, including the season projections, the individual game win expectancies, all of that. All of those will be updated every single Monday. So on every single Monday, if you're not happy with what your team outlook was the week before, and you just had a great game, you said, told you, Kelley, told you KFord ratings, like we were much better than you thought. All right, the model's going to adjust. It's going to take into account the performance that was just had on the field relative to what was expected, because it's not just win and your power rating improves or lose and your power rating goes down. It's, did you perform at or above the level that the model expected? And if so, your power rating will increase. If you performed under the level of expectation, your power rating will go down. So it is possible that teams can win games and their power rating go down week over week. On the other side, it's possible you could lose your game, but if you played better than the model expected, your power rating could actually go up. So all of that's happening kind of simultaneously behind the scenes for all 134 teams. I know on this podcast and with this fan base, we only care about 16 because it just means more. I get it. And you guys are, the SEC is really good. I get it. But I am doing it for all 134, and it's all happening simultaneously. So every single week, these things change. It's not going to be like right now I'm projecting Ole Miss 8.8 average wins. After 1 week, it's not going to be like Ole Miss is all of a sudden projecting for 11 wins. Like it's not that drastic, but it will change a couple tenths of a point. I'll tell you what it changes the most, Mike. If you win a game that you were projected to lose, like less than 50% win expectancy, or if you lose a game you were projected to win, your regular season win expectancy total will change drastically, even if your power rating doesn't. Because like we talked about earlier, if you have a 60% win expectancy, I'm accounting for 0.6 wins in my total. If you lose that game, you just lost 0.6 wins, even if everything else stayed the same. So it's going to drop significantly in 1 week there. If you win a game that you had a 0.9 or a 90% win expectancy, that's not going to bump you that much because I was already accounting for 0.9 wins and you just picked up a full win. So that's probably more in the weeds than people want. So I'll stop right there. But there's a lot happening, and I try to make it, like we talked about earlier, easily digestible for a lot of people.
Right, and I didn't say that specifically for this next team, but it applies drastically. I think Mississippi State, 4.5 projected wins, and why it's so difficult. Blew up the coaching staff, blew up the roster. I think they have an elite home field advantage. These are things that is difficult to kind of quantify sometimes. But according to the model right now, 39% chance of winning just one SEC game. But the number 5 difficult schedule in the country. Good luck projecting Mississippi State, again, with all the turnover that they have.
Yeah, it's a really hard team to project. Like you talked about, 4.5 average wins, 1.5 in conference play, 1.4 to be exact. That's the second lowest projected conference win total, only ahead of Vanderbilt for Mississippi State. I've got, there's a 2% chance that they get to 500 in SEC play. So to win 4 SEC games, I give that a 2% chance. It's a really difficult schedule, though. Number 5 most difficult in the entire country. And if we just look at the SEC slate only, take out all the non-conference, just the SEC, it's the second most difficult SEC conference slate. And it's the second most difficult, and this team doesn't face Alabama. They don't face LSU. They don't face Oklahoma. And it's still the second most difficult. That's just how tough and how deep this conference is. If you're looking at the schedule and you're trying to pinpoint wins, Eastern Kentucky to start the year, of course, you're going to hope if you're Mississippi State, that's a win. 96% win expectancy. At Arizona State, that's 52% win expectancy. That's a 50-50 game for me. If you can go on the road and win that game, that's a really good sign for this program, this team in 2024. Toledo at home, 74% win expectancy. And then after that, Mike, 93% win expectancy in week 10 against UMass. But other than that, Arkansas, maybe that's going to be a toss-up, 45% win expectancy the week before UMass, also at home in Starkville. But other than those, try to find the wins. You could get one somewhere else, but are you going to stub your toe within those ones I just talked about too? Mississippi State fans, I've got a 21% chance that they go bowling this year. Not sure if they take that or not, but that's what the numbers say right now. 4 to 5 regular season wins is by far the most likely outcome for this team. Again, with a lot of uncertainty just around this program, coaching change, roster turnover, all of that. But a lot of teams have that. Mississippi State certainly is present as well.
Yeah. All right. How about Missouri? 8.9 projected wins. That would have just blown people's doors off a year ago, Kelley. They were ready to run Drink out. Now he's the mayor of Columbia down there. Only 2 projected losses at A&M with a 38% chance to win, and at Alabama, 22%. But in fairness, Oklahoma is just a 51% chance, so quite literally a toss-up there. But, man, it could be another historic good year for Missouri.
It certainly could, and you're right. 8.9 last year, people would have been really excited. 8.9 this year, they might get fired because the expectations are so high. And again, what the model's trying to do, I understand all that, and no model's perfect. No model can capture everything. So what I use the model as, Mike, and as you know, it's a starting point for conversation. It's an objective lens through which we can view all 134, or more specifically, these 16 teams, just to give us a starting point for conversation. I don't live and die by the model. I don't believe it 100% of the time, every time, but it's pretty darn good. It's proven that with the track record. And so I trust it to at least start the conversation. This Missouri team, they're really talented. This might be the best Missouri team since, maybe 2018, maybe even before then. This is potentially the best Missouri team we've seen in Columbia in a decade or more. So it's a really good team. But what's also important for especially an SEC team, the schedule is really manageable. It's the number 32 most difficult schedule in the country. That's the easiest of any SEC team overall when you look at non-conference games as well. No other SEC team is outside the top 30 in schedule difficulty. Missouri is there at number 32. And within conference play, Missouri has the second easiest conference slate. This team misses Georgia. They miss Texas. They miss LSU. They miss Ole Miss. They miss Tennessee. They miss Florida. And then Kentucky is the other team that they miss. You're missing a lot of the teams that are projecting to be in that conversation for a spot in Atlanta. So Missouri has this unique combination of one of, if not the best roster that they've had in a very long time for their program, and a very manageable by SEC standards schedule. They need to take advantage of that this year, I believe, because I am not sure when those two factors will occur simultaneously again for Missouri. I'm not, Missouri fans, don't mishear what I just said. I don't think you're going to fall off a cliff. I don't think you're going to be terrible next year. I don't know if your schedule next year will be as favorable as it is this year. And it is possible that your team might not be projecting as strongly next year, even if it's just a slight step back. It's possible you could take a step back with a more difficult schedule. So you have to take advantage this year at Texas A&M, 38% chance, at Alabama, 22% chance, and then that Oklahoma game, as you said, 51% chance. Missouri's going to have to, I think for Missouri to make the playoff, for Missouri to be in that conversation, Missouri's going to have to win all the games they're supposed to win. So the other 9 that I didn't mention there. And then they probably have to win one of those 3 at A&M, at Alabama, or home to Oklahoma. Because while a lot of SEC teams at 9-3 would probably be in that conversation for an at-large consideration, I am not sure that Missouri finds themselves in that boat strictly because the schedule is that manageable, if you will. So I think Missouri has a good chance to get there. I've got a 63% chance to win at least 9 games, a 31% chance to win at least 10 games. It's a good team with a manageable schedule, and the pressure is on for Missouri to deliver this year because of those reasons.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, one of the biggest storylines in the sport is how Oklahoma and Texas are going to do first year in the SEC. KFord, you got Oklahoma 8.1 projected wins first season in the SEC. Better than 30% chance to win every single week, though. So that's something. And how about it? I mean, this is the conundrum the Sooners find themselves in now, Kelley. You got them as the number 8 overall team. Yet, again, in other leagues, you're going to win it. In the SEC, you may not go bowling. No, that's maybe too far. But that's the point. I mean, basically, everybody in front of you is in the conference.
I think that is too far to say they might not go bowling. However, Mike, I will say the number 8 best team in the country, you might be 500 in conference play because that's how good the SEC is. That's also how difficult this Oklahoma schedule is. It's the number 6 most difficult schedule overall when you look at non-conference as well. It's the number 3 most difficult SEC only slate. Only 2 teams have a harder SEC conference schedule than Oklahoma. So it's going to be incredibly difficult. 8-4 with this team's schedule is probably pretty good. I think 9 wins gets this team in consideration for an at-large bid. I've got a 42% chance to win 5 or more SEC games. So again, your most likely outcome here for Oklahoma is 4-4 in the SEC, with then 5-3 being next most likely. It's really tough. You get Texas in the Red River Shootout, of course, off and off week. Both teams have that, but neutral site game. Anything can happen. It's a rivalry. But let's say you get that one. You still got at Ole Miss, which is a 42% win expectancy. At Missouri is a 49% win expectancy. Alabama, now you're getting Alabama off and off week, so that should help. And you get them in Norman, but 48% win expectancy, that's a toss-up. And then you finish the season on the road at LSU. It's so difficult for this Oklahoma team, their first year in the SEC, because of the schedule they were dealt. I think this is a really good team, top 15 on both sides of the ball, potentially. Hopefully better on special teams, because this program really struggled on special teams last year to the point that it negatively affected them meaningfully in games, which it's bad when that's happening because special teams, they're only out there for a handful of plays. But Oklahoma, they're a really good team with a really hard schedule, and I think 9 wins should put them in the conversation for that at large. And I think if they get to 10, they're certainly feeling like we have a spot in the CFP. So it's going to be interesting. I struggle sometimes you talked about the year 2 jump for coaches, and I said for players as well. The year 1 of transitioning conferences, it's a mixed bag of results. You can point to, when A&M did it, they had a success right away. Even Missouri, I think it was years 2 and 3, they won the SEC East. So teams can come into the SEC and have pretty immediate success, but more times than not, this is not SEC specific, this is just any conference, you'll struggle as a program to get acclimated to the new setting on a week in, week out basis. You might surprise some teams, but you might stub your toe in games because, I know it was Texas that said it, right? Every game is the biggest game now on the schedule, which I'm sure SEC fans had fun with. But Oklahoma is used to being the biggest game on everybody's schedule. They're not this year. I mean, that's the reality. They're not. They're still a really big game. It's still a blue blood program, but they're used to in the Big 12 every single week. That's Team Super Bowl. Them and Tech, that was the Super Bowl. It's not in the SEC. You're just one of now a half a dozen to a dozen really, really good teams. So that actually might help Oklahoma to a degree, but it's going to hurt Oklahoma having to play this level of high-quality opponent week in and week out. They're not used to that.
Right. Well, someone that is used to that, Kelley, is South Carolina. 5.9 projected wins. Another gauntlet here. Number 10, most difficult schedule. According to your model, Vanderbilt, the only projected conference win. Again, high percentage in some of these other games. Kentucky, 38%. A&M, 37%. Mizzou, 37%. And Ole Miss, 32%. So they got a shot in a lot of these ball games, but... man, this is another one that's tough to peg that they really need to make a bowl to kind of recapture that momentum they had a couple years ago.
Yeah, and Mike, I saw that Shane on Shane crime that you guys had, earlier this week, last week. So I'm not going to go that far and say that Shane Beamer is going to be the first SEC coach fired. He might be, right? You don't know how these things are going to go, and it's possible that South Carolina is 1-2 after 3 weeks. Like, that is a reasonable outcome here to expect after 3 weeks of play. So who knows? But 6 wins is what my numbers are projecting as the most likely. There's a 62% chance to go bowling, and you said they really need to go bowling to keep that momentum, to recapture that momentum. I agree with that, but it is going to be difficult. We talk about conference realignment and what it means, and a lot of people, and this is nationally, look at the SEC and say, oh, they're all puffing out their chests saying, look, we got Texas and Oklahoma, and those are 2 great ads. There is no debating it. You're going to see it on the field. You're going to see it in the checkbooks, all those things. But for programs like South Carolina, and they're not the only ones, for programs like South Carolina, what this really does is just make it harder for you to win games. Like, you're adding really good teams into this conference. You got rid of the divisions, which had helped programs like South Carolina in the past. It's going to be really hard to win games. And this is a team that I think is still really good. This is a top 40 team. It's the best South Carolina team for me since maybe 2018, maybe even before that. So I think this is a really good team with a pretty strong defense. The offense, I would like to see the projections improve a little bit before I get too crazy with the win total here. I think it's a mid-60s projected offense right now, which in the SEC, that's not good enough on a week-in, week-out basis, especially when you're playing a top 10 most difficult schedule overall. So we will see about South Carolina. There are a lot of really hard games. There are some toss-up games in there. For South Carolina to have what I would say probably a good year by their standards, they're going to have a really good record in 1-score games. And I know we talked about that earlier. A lot of teams can say that. I think it's especially true for South Carolina, because if the expectation is that we're going to win 7 or 8 games, you're going to have to win all those close ones that you're going to be in this year. And the law of averages says you won't. But any given year, you do see teams that beat those averages and have great records. So South Carolina certainly has that opportunity. I have a 32% chance to win at least 7 games, but 6-6 is the most likely. And in conference play, 3-5 is the most likely. 28% chance to go 500 or better in conference play.
Mm-hmm. Now, Tennessee, 8.7 projected wins. That must be a mistake. I think I was supposed to be 11.7. Only 3 projected losses at Oklahoma, tough game, 34%. Alabama at home, 41%, and at Georgia, 14%. That's I know the history there. It's really probably a 1% in my opinion, but 70% winning percentage or more in every other game. So Tennessee, I know they got some very, very tough games, but this is a favorable slate for them as well.
Yeah, shoot, Mike, I was going to, before I came on here, I meant to up that Tennessee number, give them that little artificial boost for you. I totally forgot to do that. So I'm kidding. I don't do that for any team, regardless of what shows I'm on. Tennessee's a good team. Top 15 nationally. I'm number 13 in my power ratings, number 12 on offense, number 19 on defense. So it's a really, really good team with kind of a manageable schedule. If we're being honest about it, it's number 26 most difficult nationally. It's number 14 in the SEC. So it's the, third easiest in the SEC if you're looking at conference only slate. And there's only those 3 games that you said that you highlighted: at Oklahoma, home to Alabama, and at Georgia. Those are 3 big games, but those are the only 3 games right now that Tennessee does have less than a 70% win expectancy. So Tennessee is a team, excuse me, that I think if they take care of business, and I'm inclined to think they will. I really am. I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you, Mike. I really think they will take care of business in the games they're supposed to. And if they do, can they win one of those 3 games? At Oklahoma, home to Alabama, at Georgia. If they can, I think this is a team that has a CFP-worthy resume as an at-large. Or at least part of the conversation at a minimum, but probably going to be worthy of a bid. If they can't, and they're 9-3, I'm not sure it's enough. I don't think it's enough given the other games that are on this schedule. So it's a blessing and a curse to have the schedule that Tennessee has. Take care of your business in the games you're supposed to win or have a good chance to win. And then can you spring one upset? We've seen in years past that is possible, that Tennessee could do that. Alabama's coming back to Knoxville this year after that 2022 mayhem game that a lot of Tennessee fans remember very fondly. So can they do that again this year? If so, I like this team's chances to be in that bracket at the end of the year. If they fail to win those 3, though, it might be an uphill battle.
Mm-hmm. All right, so KFord really buying into Texas, like most people. 10.1 projected wins for the Longhorns. Only 1 projected loss, and that's Georgia at home. And even that, 44% win. So almost essentially a toss-up here. Man, how much has Sarkisian paid you for this take?
So I'm still waiting on the check from Sark. I've been told it's in the mail. But no, it's a combination, Mike, with Texas. The model's buying them. They are. I have Texas as number 4 in my power ratings, number 4 on offense, number 12 on defense. The model is buying this is a really good team. For those that are familiar with my model and familiar with my work for the last really 5 years, my model, like many other models out there, typically buys Texas, and it doesn't always work. We've seen it crash and burn on Texas from a win-loss record numerous times in recent years. Last year, it did work. Texas did make their way to the CFP finally, as lots in that fan base have expected for them to be doing for the last decade. They finally got it done in 2023. The model's expecting Texas to be good this year, but also, Mike, almost equally important, the schedule is so nice for Texas. Whoever in Norman made the people mad at the SEC office, there were people in Austin who made them very happy, because this schedule for Texas could not be, from an SEC standpoint, any more favorable. It is the easiest SEC conference slate of any team in the SEC. Texas does not play Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Missouri, Auburn, and then South Carolina. That's the other team. Texas misses almost every major player in the SEC championship race, with the exception of Georgia. And you get Georgia at home. So Texas has a very manageable schedule. It's number 19 overall in the country. So again, it's all relative when we talk about schedule difficulty in the SEC. It's the easiest conference slate, though. That game against Georgia is the only one with less than a 50% win expectancy. Week 2 is going to be a test, having to go to Michigan. But my model's down on Michigan from where that program was a year ago. So a 66% chance for Texas to win at Michigan. You've got the Red River Shootout. Again, it's a rivalry game. It's a neutral site. You never know what's going to happen. But right now, a 69% chance for Texas to win that one. And then, of course, I would say don't sleep on it, but nobody will be, to end the year at Texas A&M in probably one of the most highly anticipated games of the entire college football season, because what this rivalry means, one, but two, how long it's been since we've had this game. It's at Texas A&M, which I would have bet my entire bank account that game would be at Texas A&M, because I do not think for 1 second anybody at Texas A&M would have allowed the SEC office to make that first game against Texas at Texas this year, after Texas A&M's been in the SEC for a decade now. So I would have bet everything that game would be at Kyle Field, which of course it is. A 65% chance for Texas to win that game by my numbers right now. We will see, though. Like, Texas is going to get a big test in week 2. And then they're kind of in a cruise control mode. No offense to UTSA, Louisiana Monroe, and Mississippi State until the Red River Shootout. So let's see what Texas is all about. But my numbers do really like Texas. And also, this schedule, Mike, is just so manageable. That's why you get 10.1 average wins. That's why you get Texas as a team that my numbers really like to make the 12-team playoff. I think going to 12 benefits programs like Texas and a lot of SEC teams more than most of the country, because you get that margin for error. So Texas can't afford to stub their toe, more than twice this year, certainly, but I don't expect them to, based on what we're looking at right now.
Well, you hit on that A&M game, so we'll do them. 8.3 projected wins, and this could be a fascinating team, Kelley. Only one projected loss, and that's Texas, but essentially 4 toss-ups. Notre Dame 50%, at Florida 53%, LSU 57%, and at Auburn 56%. So again, a lot of games that could go against them or could go in their favor. It's very tough to project, but this is a team. And I know this has got nothing to do with your model, but I could see them like fringe bowl team. I could see them making the college football playoff. I mean, and it's going to be anywhere in between. This is such a hard team to peg for me.
I completely agree with you, Mike. And I also saw you on Feinbaum saying that you could see A&M having a better conference record than Texas this year. My model doesn't support that stance. However, what I will say, because of that range of outcomes that A&M could have, like you just talked about, there is a scenario in which I could see that playing out. Because especially if A&M, of course, they would have to beat Texas in that scenario for that to be the case. I could see that happening, though. And so I don't think that was as wild of a take as many people certainly gave you grief for that time when you said it to Paul. But if you look at this schedule, 50% win expectancy against Notre Dame to start the year. Literally a 50-50 toss-up game. Game day is going to be there. It's probably, if not certainly, the biggest game of week one in the national slate. A&M gets it at home. The Mike Elko era is underway, taking on, his former quarterback who's now at Notre Dame. So there's a lot of storylines there that'll make that interesting. But then at Florida in week 3 is a 53% win expectancy. If A&M can get through the first 3 weeks at 3-0, and that's a big if. That's a big, big if. But if A&M can get through the first 3 weeks at 3-0, look out for the Aggies because, where's the first loss? Bowling Green, Arkansas at a neutral site, Missouri at home, maybe. My numbers right now is 62% chance for A&M to win that game. Then there's an off week. Then you go to Mississippi State. So, it's feasible that A&M could be 11-0 7-0 when LSU comes to town in week 9. And if that's the case, all bets are off because the hype train's going, everybody's pumped up. That game's at College Station. They're going to be doing it's going to be bananas if A&M finds a way to win these toss-up games early, and it's going to set up a heck of a stretch run. As it is, again, the model's going to try to find that middle ground. That's the best case that we just talked about for A&M. The worst case is you lose all those toss-ups. You lose to Notre Dame. You lose at Florida. You lose to Missouri. And now all of a sudden, are you 500-ish when you're welcoming LSU to town? And maybe the wheels are falling off. So like you said, bowling or CFP, both are reasonable expectations. The model's shooting down the middle there. That's how you get 8.3 projected wins, 8 to 9 wins, most likely for A&M. If you look at the conference slate, 4.8 is the projected average conference wins, which, again, if you picked up this team and put them in another conference, they'd be a conference championship contender. A&M's probably not that just because there are so many teams in the SEC that are at or above their power rating level of number 16. But A&M, from a schedule standpoint in the SEC, has one of the most manageable schedules. It's the number 4 easiest conference slate. They don't play Georgia. They don't play Alabama. They don't play Oklahoma. They don't play Tennessee. They don't play Ole Miss. So there's a lot of high-profile teams, power teams, that A&M does not have to play, and that could certainly go a long way towards determining, is A&M going to finish above Texas or not, as you have boldly predicted.
Right. And then on a downer note, I hate to do it, but Vanderbilt, 3.2 projected wins, 37% chance projected to win a conference game. Number 3 most difficult schedule. We got to give them the number 1 easiest schedule just to make it fair, shouldn't we?
Well, I think we should, Mike, but part of this is like a chicken and egg thing because yeah. Vanderbilt, they don't have the quote unquote benefit of playing Vanderbilt. So any SEC team that plays Vanderbilt, their conference schedule difficulty diminishes because you're playing a weaker team. Vanderbilt, of course, doesn't have that option of playing themselves. It's also a reason that Georgia's schedule difficulty in years past was a little bit lower than others. They couldn't play themselves in the SEC East. It's the most difficult SEC schedule, largely because they don't play Vanderbilt. It's the number 3 most difficult schedule in the country, though. So you are looking at, this is a difficult schedule overall. You're probably going to get 3 wins in the non-conference at least. Alcorn State, Georgia State, Ball State. Can you win against Virginia Tech at home in week 1? My numbers give that about a 1 in 5 chance. And then are you going to win an SEC game? I have it at 50-50 right now. There's a 49% chance that Vanderbilt wins an SEC game. Which one? I don't know, but it's the cumulative adding together of each of the individual game win expectancies for Vanderbilt in the SEC that gets them to that 0.6 projected wins. So if Vanderbilt goes 4-8 and they won an SEC game, to me, that's a successful season, a highly successful season for Vanderbilt this year. It's just they're the unicorn in the SEC. They're the program that doesn't fit, but they're there. They're going to be there. We understand why they're there. But from a football standpoint, they don't fit. They stick out like a sore thumb, and it's likely that will be the case more years than not.
Yeah. And then, I wanted to ask you this. I don't know if it's fair or not, but is there one team that you're most confident in the model's projection, and then maybe one that you're the least confident? Is there one that sticks out for either one of those?
That's a really good question, Mike. Let me think about it right here. I'll say least confident, and I hope it doesn't come off wrong. Oklahoma. All right, I have Oklahoma right now as the number 8 power-rated team in the country. I'm not sure that Oklahoma is the number 8 power-rated team in the country. I'm really not. So that's a team that I personally wouldn't have quite as high as the model does. Again, when you look at the conference standings, they're middle of the pack. So it's like, yeah, okay, I'll buy that. But from a strictly power rating standpoint, I'm not sure they're number 8. So that's a team that I'd say, yeah, I'm not really buying necessarily 100% what the model's saying there. Again, I don't go strictly by the model. It's a starting point for conversation. I've gotten much better at that over the years of trying to go with that. But separating Kelley-Ford's opinion from the KFord rating model opinion. But then a team that I am confident in, that I do feel good about the projections, it's probably, I mean, it's a cop-out, but Georgia. Like, Georgia is the best team in the country. The model says that. My brain says that. My eyes say that when I watch this team, when we look at the roster of this team, when you look at Kirby Smart and what he's done. So that's probably a cop-out. But I'll say Georgia, and not just that they're number 1. They are number 1 by a bit of a margin here. If I quickly look, and I'll pull up very quickly. If I look at my power ratings, Georgia right now with a 30.9. Ohio State is a 26.6. So there's about a 4-point gap between Georgia and Ohio State for number 1 and number 2. That's a massive gap in a power rating world. I think that's about right. I think Georgia is that much better than anybody else. So that's who I'll go with for what I'm confident in.
Yeah, last SEC question, Kelley, and I know this is all guesswork because we've never had a 12-team playoff. We've never had this SEC. We've never had non-divisions. We've never had Oklahoma and Texas in here. But how many? So many people are just so hyper focused on the playoff. I personally, I'm not. We'll get there when we get there. But for those people, how many realistic SEC teams do you think will make the college football playoff?
I'm with you, Mike. I think we'll get there when we get there. But what I find, like you said, so many people hyper-focus. I post something about the CFP and it blows up on social media. Right. Like people love talking about the playoffs. So I'm like, all right, if this is what people want, then I'll say what my projections are. But if it was up to me, we'd be talking regular season all day. I get it. They want to talk playoff. And here we are. We're talking playoff. Realistically, how many teams? Mike, it's going to be at least 4. The SEC is going to have at least 4 teams in the playoff. I feel pretty darn confident in that. Again, we're guessing. We don't know how the committee is going to react to the number of losses these teams are going to have. We don't know if they're going to account how or if they're going to account for schedule difficulty, like how strong is the record against that schedule. But I put the over-under, Mike, of SEC teams in the playoff right at 4, expecting. I might have put it at 4.5, Mike, really, because I think it's very possible that 5 SEC teams make the playoff. Of the 7 at-large spots, a minimum of 3 and maybe even 4 are going to go to the SEC. So I think right now, looking at my own projections, would suggest the same, because right now I have 5 teams. If I ran the season, simulated the season using my version 2 power ratings, preseason power ratings, what did my most deserving rankings look at the end of the year? Right now, I have 5 teams from the SEC in the 12-team playoff, and it's not just that. Notre Dame comes as the first team out, but after that, Tennessee, Oklahoma, they're the next 2. So there's 2 SEC teams just on the outside waiting to get in. Then there's Clemson from the ACC, but after that, it's Missouri. And then there's Miami, Florida from the ACC, but then it's Texas A&M. So it's, even if it's not the 5 teams that I'm right now projecting to make the playoff, I still think it's 5 teams from the SEC. So I'll revise my statement. I actually think if I was setting the over-under, I'd set it at 4.5. Maybe juice to the under a little bit, but I actually think that there's going to be 5 teams in there at the end. Will the committee actually do that? I don't know, but it's more likely than not that there will be 5 deserving teams from the SEC that would be in the playoff.
Right. And then last thing for you, Kelley, really appreciate all your time. This is, I keep saying it. We say it every offseason. This is going to be the best season yet. But legitimately, this is going to be the best season yet with all the change, all the uncertainty, all the excitement. But are you more excited for the season, or are you more excited about the college football video game?
Mike, I'll be honest with you, man. I'm more excited for the video game right now in this moment. It's been 11 years since we've had this thing. I've got the collection. I've got every single NCAA football video game that's ever been made. I'm dying to add to that collection. I probably won't have the opportunity to play as much of this game as I have. And there you go. You got the collection right there.
This is my oldest one I got right here.
There you go. 100%.
Yeah.
I've got every single one going back to the first Bill Walsh. Like, man, I am so excited. And, we'll get the game. I'll play it a bunch. real life's going to get in the way. I got the wife and the 2 kids. I didn't have either of those things when the last game came out. I was in college, right? So we got the full-time job. We got the ratings work. I'm not going to be able to play it as much as I played when I was younger. I recognize that. But man, have I missed this game. And I know there are so many people out there who have missed it just as much as I have. So right now, I'm more excited for the game. How about a month after the game comes out and it's week 0, like it's Thursday of week 0? Yeah, I'll probably say I'm more excited for the season. But in this moment, I am more excited for that video game, Mike. I cannot wait. Hey, are you PS5 or are you Xbox One or X or whatever we're on?
PS5.
PS5 as well. All right, man. We'll have to do like an online dynasty or something. Get that going. It'll be fun.
Yeah, no doubt, because I can relate. I'm so sad the game left, but it has helped my personal relationships. I would not have this show, would not be a success if I had that damn game, because it sucked up so much of my time. So it's a blessing and a curse, just like talking to you, Kelley. So I really appreciate it. Before you go, can you tell the audience, how can they follow you? How can they find your work?
Yeah, for sure, Mike. I appreciate you having me on, as always. I love the show, and it's an honor to be a guest. You can find me on X at KFord Ratings. You can find me on the website, KFordRatings.com. All the content I'm producing, I post to one, if not both, of those places. So at KFord Ratings, KFordRatings.com. And again, Mike, I just really appreciate it. The SEC was already the best conference in college football. You've added Texas and Oklahoma, and you've just gotten that much better. So it's an honor to talk with you about the SEC, and I'm really excited to see how this first year of the 16-team league plays out in the Southeastern Conference.